I wanted to recap that last application exercise from class today. And this is a real world case. This is every one of these policies is in play somewhere or another in Portland, actually. Anyway, let's go through these options, and I just want to do what we did in class, but not rush it so much. All right, let's look at option A. City authorities should impose rent controls. We'd analyze this by means of the supply and demand framework just for the market. The market gets at the most important, the market analysis gets at the most important dollars per square foot, the units of price, and then say thousands of square feet per month. All right, so there's this rental housing market in Portland, and I'm drawing the supply curve as upward sloping. It's closer to vertical in the short run anyway, but there's some equilibrium rent. We're assuming the apartments are identical, obviously a simplifying assumption, and that's how the market would work. A rent control law, typically a rent control law is to freeze rents, and then as demand grows, price can't rise with demand. I guess we can model it like that. I'm going to let's suppose rents are frozen at P0, and then with in-migration, demand grows, so the market would clear at a higher price, but it's not allowed. Well, over time, we see that the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied, and that shortage continues to grow with time. Now, sometimes people can take their apartments off the market and turn them into condominiums. You would have fewer ADUs, accessory dwelling units, being rented out. There's all sorts of response that would enable landlords to restrict the quantity supplied over time. So we have this shortage, and what's more, the people that are most likely to get an apartment in this setting are the people that can pay more. If you're a landlord and you've got lines every time an apartment comes up, you want to get paid every month, and you'd rather rent to someone that's going to pay you for sure than someone who's not. And so this cap on rent doesn't necessarily help the target audience, the poor households at all. And the efficiency analysis, if we assume that the people with the highest willingness to pay get the apartments, we see that this area is dead weight loss, surplus that's not realized in the price ceiling case, the rent control case, that would have been realized in a competitive market. And this, in a nutshell, is why economists tend to be really averse to rent control. It's not that economists don't want to help the poor. It's just if you want to help the poor, there's other ways to do it. Rent ceilings, rent control tends to create a lot of inefficiency and be very poorly targeted. It doesn't help the people that are intended to be helped. So let's think about how streamlining the process of getting a permit to build residential housing would look. This approach would, I guess I'm going to start in red. The streamlining the process of renting housing or building apartment housing for rent, I guess, is what we're talking about here. Portland has a notoriously difficult process, and so making it easier would greatly reduce costs to developers. And that alone would shift supply to the right, and we'd expect prices to fall, the number of apartments rented to rise, and there would be some relief to tenants, of poor tenants as well as rich. Another idea can be described again crudely by this increase in supply, but here the government is one way or another supplying the housing, and government has not been the best at building housing affordably. The government there's very stringent codes that government bodies adhere to. They're stricter than the development code. For all people, the government is not disciplined by costs. Government can tax to pay the bills, and where private developers are worried about how much rent they can get for the units they build, and they can only make money if they keep costs low. But public entities don't face that discipline to keep costs low, and public housing has been extremely expensive. However, there are public-private partnerships that have been very effective, and that's what Metro is hoping to do, and they need the law change to be able to do that. And if that happens, the way that's going to look is that Metro would kick in some money and maybe some zoning breaks, etc., to enable apartment buildings to be built, and in return the developer would promise, and it would be enforceable by the governing body, the developer would maybe supply 20% of the new units as affordable housing, charged below market rates for rent, and screen by income level the tenants that would qualify for the relatively inexpensive housing. So that's how one would analyze these cases using the supply and demand model. Again, the devil is often in the details, but and we're willing to give up some efficiency for improving fairness, equity, but we'd rather do the most good for the least cost, and these supply and demand analyses can help us identify which policies promise to do that. Another idea is to provide housing subsidies to poor people, and we can't really distinguish between poor and rich people in this in this analysis, but we could certainly make subsidies means tested. And so in this case, the way you analyze a subsidy is somewhat the reverse of a tax. If the market clears initially at P naught, Q naught, and there's a subsidy to poor people, we'll just show what a subsidy to anybody would do. The subsidy would be paid to suppliers by government. Buyers would pay out of pocket P1. Sellers would receive P1 plus S. So, market prices would rise, but because the government is kicking money in, the money out of pocket paid by poor tenants would fall, and thus they'd be able to afford apartments. The case of public housing